Hello everyone! On this presentation, we'll try to explain the PSAK 19. There are 6 elements that we'll discuss on this presentation. First, measurement and recognition. Second, expense recognition. Third, measurement after recognition. Fourth, useful life. Fifth, intangible asset with finite useful life. And the last, intangible asset with indefinite useful life. Next, my friend Kurniawan will start this presentation by explain the measurement and recognition.
Okay, thank you Angga for the introduction. Now I will explain about the separate acquisition or perolehan terbatas. Normally, the price that have to be paid by the entities for the separate acquisition of intangible assets will reflect the probability of future economic benefits of the assets that will be obtained by the entities. In other words, the entities will estimate the existence of economic benefit inflow, even if there is an uncertainty about the time and the amount of those inflows. As an addition, cost of intangible assets that is separately obtained usually can be reliably measured. The example cost of intangible assets consists of purchase price, which includes import duties and purchase taxes that cannot be restituted, and all costs that can be directly attributed in order to prepare the assets, so the assets can be used according to its intentions. The example of costs that can be attributed are the cost of employee benefits, professional fees, and cost to test whether the assets can be properly functioned or not. And the examples of expenditure that is not included as an intangible assets are cost to introduce the product, cost to have the business, administration costs, and overhead costs. Okay, that's all from me. Now, my friends Clara Amanda will explain about the intangible assets in business combination circumstances and internally generated intangible assets.
Thank you, Kurniawan. Now let's talk about intangible asset in business combination circumstances. Intangible asset, which is obtained by a business combination transaction, will be recognized as fair value. It reflects economic value that the company will receive and will be recorded separately with goodwill. Then, intangible asset, which is caused by a grant, can be recognized at fair value or its face value. And last, intangible assets which are obtained by exchange of assets must be recognized at fair value if, first, it has commercial substance, and second, it can be reliably measured at fair value. A business transaction is said to have commercial substance when it is expected that the future cash flow of a business will change as a result of the transaction. If it doesn't meet both requirements, it is recognized at carrying amount. Pause dulu sampai situ. Now, let's talk about internally generated of an asset. First, internally generated goodwill shall not be recognized as an asset. Second, in deciding an internally generated asset is meet the requirement of intangible asset or not, entity does these 2 steps, research and development. Third, no intangible asset arising from research shall be recognized. Expenditure on research shall be recognized as an expense when it is incurred. Then, an intangible asset arising from development shall be recognized if and only if an entity can demonstrate all of the following items. 6. Expenditure on an intangible item shall be recognized as an expense when it is incurred unless A. It forms part of the cost of an intangible asset that meets the recognition of criteria, or B. The item is acquired in a business combination and cannot be recognized as an intangible asset. If this is the case, it forms part of the amount recognized as goodwill at the acquisition date. Okay, so that's all from me. Now let's move on to expense recognition and measurement after recognition by Gavin Pradipta.
Thank you, Clara, for the presentation. Hello everyone, my name is Gavin Pradipta. Here I'm going to explain about expense recognition and also the measurement after the recognition. So basically, expenditure on intangible item should be recognized as an expense when it is incurred unless it forms part of the cost of an intangible asset that meets the recognition criteria, or the item is acquired in a business combination and cannot be recognized as an intangible asset. If this is the case, it forms part of the amount recognition as goodwill at the acquisition date. But all of you have to know that any spending that already recognized as an expense cannot be capitalized as an asset. And for the measurement after recognition, an entity shall choose either the cost model or the revaluation method as its accounting policy. So if an intangible asset is accounted for using the revaluation model, all the other assets in its class also be counted for using the same model. For the cost model, after the initial recognition, an intangible asset shall be carried as its cost less any accumulated amortization and any accumulated impairment losses. For revaluation model, after initial recognition, an intangible asset shall be carried at a revalued amount, being its fair value at the date of the revaluation less any subsequent accumulated amortization and any subsequent accumulated impairment losses. And for the purposes of the revaluations, under this standard, fair value shall be determined by reference to an active market. Unless there is no active market for those assets, the assets will be cost model method measurement. If an intangible asset carrying amount is increased as a result of a revaluation, the increase shall be recognized in other comprehensive income and accumulated in equity under the heading of revaluation surplus. And if an intangible asset carrying amount is decreased as a result of revaluation, the decrease shall be recognized in profit or loss. However, the decrease shall be recognized in other comprehensive income to the extent of any credit balance in the revaluation surplus in respect of that asset. So, that's all from me. Thank you for watching. And next, it will be Tania who will present about intangible assets with definite useful lives. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tania. First, I will explain about the useful life. Useful life is the period in which the asset is expected to be available for use by the entity, or the amount of production or similar units expected to be obtained from the asset by the entity. An entity assesses whether the useful life of an intangible asset is finite or indefinite, and if finite, the length of or the number of production or similar units constituting that useful life. An intangible asset shall be regarded by the entity as having an indefinite useful life when, based on an analysis of all the relevant factors, there is no foreseeable limit for the period over which the asset is expected to generate net cash inflows for the entity. The depreciable amount of an intangible asset with a finite useful life shall be allocated on a systematic basis over its useful life. Depreciable amount is the cost of an asset or other amount substituted for cost less its residual value. Amortization shall begin when the asset is available for use. The amortization method shall reflect the pattern in which the asset's future benefits are expected to be consumed by the entity. If the pattern cannot be determined reliably, by the straight line method shall be used. The residual value of an intangible asset with a finite useful life shall be assumed to be zero unless there is a commitment by a third party to purchase the asset at the end of its useful life, or there is an active market for the asset and residual value can be determined by reference to that market, and it is probable that such a market will exist at the end of that useful life. The amortization period and the amortization method for an intangible asset with a finite useful life shall be reviewed at least at each financial year end. It is expected useful life of the asset is different from previous estimates. The amortization period shall be changed accordingly. Such changes included in residual value shall be accounted for as changes in accounting estimates in accordance to PSAK 25. Next, Mardina will explain about intangible assets with indefinite useful life.
Hello everyone, I'm Mardina Natalia and I'm going to explain about the intangible assets with indefinite useful life. Okay, an intangible assets with an indefinite useful life shall not be amortized. In accordance with PSAK 48 about the impairment of assets, an entity is required to test an intangible asset with an indefinite useful life for impairment by comparing its recoverable amount with its carrying amount by doing it first, annually, and whenever there is an indication that the intangible asset may be impaired. The useful life of an intangible asset that is not being amortized shall be reviewed on each period to determine whether events and circumstances continue to support an indefinite useful life assessment for that asset. If they don't, the change in the useful life assessment from indefinite to finite shall be accounted for as a change in accounting estimate in accordance with PSAK 25, accounting policies, changes in accounting estimates, and error. In accordance with PSAK 48, impairment of assets, a revaluation of the useful life of intangible assets from unlimited to limited is one indication of the possibility of assets experiencing impairment. As a result, the entity tests a decline in the value of an asset by comparing the recoverable amount in accordance with PSAK 48, impairment of assets and their carrying amount, and recognize any excess carrying amount of the recoverable amount as an impairment loss. To determine whether an intangible asset determines impairment, the entity applies PSAK 48, impairment of assets. PSAK 48 describes when and how an entity reviews the carrying amount of an asset, how to determine the recoverable amount of an asset, and when an entity recognizes or reserves an impairment loss. That's all from me, and next you all will hear the summary from Angga Fahmi Dirga. Thank you.
Before we end this presentation, I will try to sum up the PSAK 19. Started from first, recognition and measurement. The recognition of an item as an intangible asset requires an entity to demonstrate that the item meets the definition of intangible asset and the recognition criteria. This requirement applies to costs incurred initially to acquire or internally generate an intangible asset and those incurred subsequently to replace part of or service it. If an intangible asset is acquired in a business combination, the cost of the intangible asset is its fair value at the acquisition date. Second, expense recognition. Expenditure on intangible item shall be recognized as an expense where it is incurred unless meets the recognition criteria or the item is acquired in a business combination and cannot be recognized as an intangible asset. Third, measurement after recognition. There are two models. First, cost model. After initial recognition, an intangible asset shall be carried at its cost less any accumulated amortization and any accumulated impairment losses. Second, revaluation model. After initial recognition, an intangible asset shall be carried at a revalued amount being its fair value at the date of the revaluation, less any subsequent accumulated amortization and any subsequent accumulated impairment losses. For useful life. Useful life is the period over which an asset is expected to be available for use by an entity, or the number of production or similar units expected to be obtained from the asset by an entity. Fifth, intangible asset with finite useful lives. The depreciable amount of an intangible asset with a finite useful life shall be allocated on a systematic basis over its useful life. The residual value of an intangible asset with a finite useful life shall be assumed to be zero unless first, there is commitment by a third party to purchase the asset at the end of its useful life, or there is an active market for the asset and residual value can be determined by reference to that market, and it's probable that such a market will exist at the end of the asset useful life. And the last, intangible asset with indefinite useful lives. An intangible asset with indefinite useful life shall not be amortized. Based on PSAK 48, impairment of asset, an entity is required to test an intangible asset with indefinite useful life for impairment. That's all from us. Hope it can be useful. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.